Okay, I think live. An urgent message. Just got a message that might be relevant to game. It's not a quick investigation topic, so I'll just decide. So we'll do the second part of the afternoon stream. So a lot of exciting things happening. So just want to quick recap. So we morning the morning stream, well, early afternoon stream, the first phase. What we did, fixed data points in Excel, Google spreadsheet. Exported this data. We triggered data cruncher, which combined data files into one planting JSON. So we would have the most complete name. We decided to go with 3 varieties for tomato. I talked about changing the existing model so they look a little bit different. One model reflecting, taking one model and making 3 varieties so that each variety would actually get a name here. Then we assume that any one of these models is good enough to trigger the buy button. So we would place, we would work with a preview logic. This bug actually happened last time too, I think. Normally we would actually have a preview that was following the mouse cursor. Just going to relaunch the game. It so far, but this, any one of these will be the same. So this is what I'm talking about. We were then investigating the option of creating interactable objects in an abstract way so that I wouldn't have to manually create them. This white plane right now is a raised bed. So when I click in its space, it actually the previewed model in raised bed space. And when we have a different interactable object, when we click here, I was hoping it would actually put it here because that's the interactable object space. But I think the problem we are seeing right now, the fact that this eggplant is hovering, is the fact that it's actually kind of respecting this raised beds. And I bet if I go into raised beds contents node, I have 2 pepper. And one of them should have been in the contents node of ground. So this position information we are broadcasting from, see, sample level interactable. This click position, it's labeled as click position. It's input event, but I think this should have been ground interactable object. It kind of was before. Anyway, we were actually, this is kind of where we left off. And whether we fix this position data or we want to abstract object creation, it's more or less around the same topic. Because it's about different object spaces and position data, mesh data shared or uniquely created. So let's look into this issue. Yeah, I'm actually in ground object. Because the static body is this blue. Remember seeing it. The collision shape for the okay here. It's not. That's the static. So for this raised beds center. Of course, this static body doesn't match the bed. That's fine. So Godot is saying that this plane is going to be. That's fine. That's for. Hmm. So the abstract interactable scene topic. That's where we left this whole thing. We're streaming. I think that still has some benefit. Like if we investigate that topic, it might be more beneficial than investigating why the cursor is not finding the right object. Because finding the right object is essentially collision shape. And if the collision shape is going to be dependent on the model, in this case, it's a manually placed model. But this model will be dynamic, so that I could actually create a scene dynamically by just changing the mesh, but then the static body and collision shapes would do. Or this structure is actually kind of wrong because workflow wise, it is technically possible to access one mesh instance sort of like instead of labeling this as raised bed, this is sort of like generic mesh instance, whatever. And we update the mesh based on file system. But then we have to trigger a bunch of other things that fixes the collision shape based on that. Whether you do this sort of tri-mesh, calculate the static body based on your tri-mesh, that sort of thing, and that's costly. You wouldn't want to do that in runtime. So instead, when we initialize these models, eggplant, here's an eggplant model, the mesh, whatever. So in this scene itself, if I create, like in this case, just this rectangle, it's like the bounding box, that's fine. But if I bet if I created a static body here with the collision shape of a rectangular object like that would be enough. Then this whole thing would be put inside a spatial object that is then named eggplant. And then next to that, there would be these two things sitting. That these two things right now looks part of the instance, but instead these two should be sibling to this, and then all these three being siblings should be parented to something that is either eggplant or pepper or whatever. And then that whole thing is put in the scene as in. Uh, going to write a comment chat so that people who log in, they actually see the agenda for the next hour. I keep using this word interactable, but I think that the most grammatically correct word is interactive. So I think this would also save us from a different kind of problem. See, this is just a ripe eggplant. This will have 3 or 4 more mesh instances for keeping different phases of the egg. So then if this is going to be, if next to this we are going to put position 3D and contents, it says that this should be labeled model, not eggplant, because everything that holds it will be at runtime labeled as. Okay, I think I should be constructing an interactable scene. And just because I'm anal, I want to investigate whether it's interactable or interactive for good. I'm abusing it. There is no such thing as interactive. It's interactive. Acting or capable of acting on each other. So we are going to have a 3D scene which is interactive. Okay. This will have now when I import the scenes from Blender, that's going to be a whole other conversation. But if the models are already coming in as eggplant GLB or GLTF, double clicking now will ask question, create a scene out of the model. Whether we keep different stages of the eggplant here, but all in all, this is going to be an eggplant scene or app. Once it's imported into interactive, this by itself won't be eggplant because it's kind of awkward. Well, go make the imported model the first child of interactive. It's bad architecture, so maybe like this is the model we want to show, or this is more like the representation. If this is a raised bed or eggplant or whatever interactive object that is represented with this model, model will be injected on. We will have we will have contents, as we were discussing. Similarly, we will have path information. Now, when we create the child, when we inject other interactive objects, it could be an arbitrary thing, or it would have to follow position. This position, we should keep position. Okay, I think I'm not making myself clear, but let me just see here, and we go back to here. Let's save this as intro. Why position information? What I mean, I want to open the model. Bottom. This may stay. I can always open. Let's look at this. Now this looks like this is a good example. So when we want to plant something that is growing along this trellis versus two different plants here, and a combination of these two things, meaning divide this unit in half. The center of this volume here is one spot where something grow. Similarly here, and then maybe two more spots here, and maybe even 3 or 4, so that you divide this line into 4, and cucumber may grow along this. So then you have different different position 3D nodes inside this interactive. My initial plan was something like this. Let me pretend that I'm writing it, but I will either cancel it or will. In Godot, when you say tool, I believe you could create an enumerated list here, and then once it's changed, it actually updates, meaning this. Just first try to emulate that. I think it was enum. Here is where we have a long ass list. For now, let's keep it plant. Maybe it doesn't even. So say export var. I think this is also going to be. There was some discussion between it being problem with tool or not. Var representation. This is going to be eggplant. We know we have eggplant model, pepper model, red onion. Somehow we have this data somewhere. When I click this, I was hoping to see it populated here. Yeah, that's the already versus, and this should not be an array like that. I think that's where export. This is. Let's read the document. Alex. None of the export var. This script exports. Exporting arrays. This array. Yeah. So I'll just say array. Maybe I'll later do pack scenes because once we have the model references imported, then it could going to be like that. Of course, what kind of array it is not proper to this change not the but I kind of remember we had a drop down. Is that when we use the enums for excuse me. I think it's effortless to copy this. Stick it. That was not it. Resource file. Forgot about that. I could create some of my models as resource. this named enum. I think this is what I was. Port. I think there was a shorthand method. Let's just use. Okay, I think that is it. Here's thing one. So it was definitely enum, but maybe a named enum. So here, when you do this versus this, that is the difference. So if I had to change this to an enum, I think this is what I was doing. Enum representation, and this was becoming this. So I don't need. And what is the variable? The variable is going to be this. So could this be shorthand? Port parentheses named. And I kind of remember right. Let's see. Export var represent equals this. If I do this, can half that. Okay. This is expected constant. This is essentially that. Unless you are liking. Oh, my bad. Those strings are killing. This was always going to work. It's killing. I kind of remember doing. Except now that I'm doing it right way for the enum, the enum is misplaced and for this var x. Here you don't go with parsing misplaced e. Yeah, okay. Let's simplify. I may remember how I did it back then, but different problems, different times. Different. Very good. Presentation like this, and internally this is the variable. So the only question right now is, I think this also had a set get method. Sorry, not set get. We could assign set get methods. Say they do something. Do something is this. The setter function needs to receive exactly one argument, which is the value. What is that value? Do not pass. Just output that value. Now, this interactive scene, clear the out, change eggplant from eggplant to, sorry, pepper to eggplant. Eggplant to pepper, but yeah, we have to update the way. So because this is a tool, actually, this is going to work no matter what. This is going to work even when an outside script is going to change the value of this. Then it's going to run this. This is fine. But where we are going to take advantage of this, the right tool is the fact that we are going to make this change in the inspector, and it's going to initialize the correct model. That is the goal, so that I'm not manually doing stuff. And I think this is the getter. It's done. Done. Maybe output the current value. Of course, you kind of say done. Done what? It's firing multiple times. Down is 0, now it's 2, and then triggers down 3 more times. Because there's internal stuff going on. Actually checking the rendering. And this is most likely firing because even though it's not an explicit selection, the fact that I choose red onion, but it kind of goes back to showing eggplant. Non-value is showing 0 as if the 0th index is selected. Also, our next goal is this. So 0, 1, 2. But do I really want to get the index number of the enum or the label? Get the label. I think this is what we were doing. Representation keys. Because it acts like a dictionary. So here we pass the value. So this should get us pepper, red onion. That is good. Now, another question here. Formulating the question. Maybe it won't be. The names are all this interactive business. Let's not forget that we still need to find signals to static body of our model. But the question I was actually formulating, this still acts more like a generic interactive. It does not quite know how many position 3D objects it must have. More specifically, a case like this display. We could have four position 3D nodes here for the vertical growth, and then two more for sort of unit growth. When I make this model attractive scene in Godot, if this trellis model had a specific name so that it could be represented as an item in this presentation. And imagine we just picked its name, that's fine. Output one. But then how many growth points does it have? Where do we keep? I could keep some kind of data out there. Because a while ago we also investigate something else, which is in VS Code. Open this is not what? Eggplant scene under assets. The text scene in Godot is basically a text file. It is essentially saying that actually now that we are working on interactive, I think I saved it. Save it. Let's look at interactive. Here's the scene we see in Godot. Everything. So you have interactive spatial nodes, few more spatial nodes, position. Here's how it's represented. The scene has an external resource, this path, and it's ID'd as 1. Now this external resource is referenced here as the script attached to this spatial node that has a name interactive. Here you first list your external resources, then reference them here. And this representation null is, I believe that is actually the variable. And you have all these other nodes. So if I figure out a decent way of trying to create a formula here, I could be writing text files like this or trellis, eggplant, or whatever. And it's just referencing some different model name like this. That the eggplant scene is actually using a model like this, but then part of this is actually going to be nested. Or more like inherited scene. They already have in a sample level. This one actually doesn't, but game. Game scene has inherited scenes. Camera is an sun is handling its own scene manager. So when we come here and we open game, here's what's going on. Let's actually this. And here's how you handle included inherited scene. The scene itself is referenced as such and given an ID. This external resource at some point is going to call X resource 2, which is in this case camera, and coming right under, yeah, right here. I mean, I could even create a position 3D node, changes transform based on the information getting from JSON. All I need to figure out is correct coordinates and just type them, and there's going to be some kind of loop. However, how many position 3D objects you have, create as many nodes as possible. This is interesting. I suppose the starting point here is, what is the final state of this? That's what I should decide. And then maybe I can move on to data representation, doing the data reading and creating. The reason why I'm discussing all these possibilities, I think we already have quite a few plans. Now, option number one, I devise a creative method like this, so that with all those models, we quickly crank out all the representations. We don't manually create them. This offers future possibility that we, with increasing number of models, we are going to follow the same workflow. We are going to be very happy with the scene creation. Option number two, since this is a demo, and I have, I believe, less than 4 weeks, screw half of the plant list I have, create a few manually decorated instances here. Just put them in your game, kind of hard code and move. It's 5:15. I could give this some. let's say by the end of tonight, if I'm not making substantial progress on system dynamics, then I'll go with the manual, which won't be too late. So if we are approaching this method seriously, then the next thing to discuss is this. Say we have this model, good. How do we know the... I could actually do this too. Maybe it doesn't have to be that precise. If I know this model will have 6 position 3D nodes, I could mark that somewhere, 6. And it's going to create 6 nodes under here. And then once I have the scene, I will save it as and I have one if I created a scene from this with the hope that in the next iteration I'll be creating that, which will have 0 position. That's fine. But it will be dynamically doing something here because there's this tool. Okay. It's as if I should remove this tool right away because it will keep creating and kind of overwriting itself every single time. Always run. As if something here should be triggered by click of a... So in a much more simplified version, in Unity, when you extend the inspector, so you put your own button, does it exist in Godot? Godot inspector. How do I export a clickable button to inspector? Relatively new question. This year in January. Something like, for instance, generate points button that will fill an array with random. I think I may have to create an editor script. Doesn't expose away. Well, you could create your this. This is what I was doing. Pretty much like when the value is changed. Script must be in tool, yeah. Should be made to keep the variables original. Yeah, inspector. That's something. Actually exposes. This is something useful too, that I could create my own plugin to prepare as separate. But if it's all text-based for, I could actually write my own script that does that. Of course, this works with visual assets. Especially stuff like Gizmo stuff. They don't have screenshots, but I understand what they mean. You create stuff and then you expose buttons here. Click me that when something is selected here. Going into the dock. Okay. And you enable it here, which then comes to this on. So this is kind of useful if I want to create urban farmer model. There's a big ass button here, which is actually this scene you are creating here as a normal scene, and you expose the scenes. This is the metadata for Godot, and this is what happens with the when your scene is initialized, which is basically an editor plugin, which is also a tool, which means when it's running, it's actually going to do something with the editor. This plus two. Yeah, you just add yourself to the left dock, and where you create a copy of the scene. And somewhere you need to have this the management of, because no, I think so. Yeah, that was it. Trying to see this output. You click me. Trying to see that you click me. Okay, here. Yeah, this is attached to the button itself. Right? We don't get to see the right hand side, but that must be it because it's interesting because I could be having my own dock here, which is going to present a list like this. Essentially, I'm already exposing selection to the interface instead of writing my own inspector. I'm kind of piggybacking on the inspector now. I'm already doing some work here. I could technically create, let's say, do some of the basic work here. Let's create a spatial node here and say, uh, positions. And then this is actually going to be empty. And when something changes, create positions. Okay, and this is going to be number of positions. Simply positions, don't be silly. Okay, for position in positions is essentially a number. What you are trying to do is inside positions you add child is primitive, not primitive, position 3D, the new position. Now let's do this. Export integer var position. Okay. This is going to be -1, and we are going to do something like if positions is bigger than 0, something, and you do set get create positions. You are bailing out because if position is this, else you are, so you do this, so this and then return. This is kind of the implicit else case. Okay, so you create position, and this isn't declared in. I think this is what I fuck. This is correct. The positions. Let me change this to 0. Say 2. Change it. Yeah. 2, 2, 3, 3. Position is less than 0. Do nothing. Not position. You don't return, then you should be printing. And you do. You should be doing that. What am I missing here? And when you do this, how many children does this? It actually, oh, okay. So it actually keeps adding. We are not seeing them in the scene because this had something to do with that value check. And I did not pay. This set get thing we're reading. This. When changing and exported variables from a script in tool mode, where we are. The value in the inspector won't be updated automatically. Updated called property list change note after setting exported variables. I'm also not manually never setting the value because normally with the setter you bind the change value to existing variable. Property property list change. Property list change 3. Was the mechanism that actually really updated this mode? Just that. It. Just this is the main language reference. Yeah, I'm kind of getting more and more determined with going forward with script and this tool. Maybe because I don't really have that much experience. I remember seeing a lot of good stuff done with it in tutorials and such, but I don't think I have practical knowledge. But it's as if we keep adding adding to position. And if anything, position section listing call fields remove children. Okay, because this is now the problem. This and this is not children. Okay, because it's a part of the game. For that to run, this should be made. Going in a very interesting direction. 3, that is done. We still don't have this guy. I'm going to go online and ask a dumb question. I add child and I don't see it. And I'm either going to find a lot of trivial answers or the answer is really so trivial that I'm missing. I'll embrace. This is the shit. Without setting the owner. And I think there was something about as if when you do this, it sets the context and what the because you have this. What is the owner? Owner is position. Does this even make a difference? Does not. Owner value. In addition to this is typically relevant for tool scripts and either we are in that area. Set the owner. A node can have any other node as long as it is grandparent sending in. When saving a node, use backseat. Owner is just another set owner. Sweet. Essentially a node. So hoping there was the same thing. It was a bit easier. Okay, this is the question. Godot inspector, not inspector. Godot tool, head child. There's someone creating nodes with new, just like I do, and adding them to the hierarchy, just like I do, and using set owner, which I do right before. However, the nodes never show up in the because when I do this, it shows them pretty much like I. The only difference is I put it right before the at least their owner is set. Here's the tool. Ready, holder node. When there is some input. Yeah, but this is also kind of running in time, and he mentioned that, so that's a bit of a scary area. Yeah, you want to add and remove nodes while the game runs. That's not exactly what tool does. You may want that, but okay. Yeah, I mean, what I'm discussing. Information from the file. Imagine I read that value 3 from a script file. I don't care. Calculates that. So literally, the only difference is that the owner is set after I add the check. Really, the only difference. Yeah. Could be as dumb as that. So the node's owner, position's owner is itself in this case. So motherfucker worked, but awkward. I think this looks you 2, it should remove 3 and then put only 2. You do it here. First 3, 2. Interesting. What difference does it make when you selfie? Self being interactive root node. 4 does not matter. In this case, it actually doesn't really. it's less than 0, it returns actually. It did because 0 it did. It put an empty array here. Either way, you should remove. Is this still pissing me off? Is this? We are kind of step for like we have moved a step further. I'm a little bit tempted about that plugin, creating my own doc. Because if I happen to select a bunch of things there, say I'm going to initialize a model here, the representation mode. And at some point, I will want to save this scene as eggplant. Next time I open the eggplant scene, because the whole point of creating number of positions, 3D object positions, is the fact that I quickly create them so that when I save the scene as an eggplant or trellis, whatever, I come back, reopen it, and then move those position 3Ds, 3D view. So at that point, this tool will be running. And the fact that it's running, as long as I'm not changing the number of positions, which is, well, if you do change it, you are kind of resetting all the positions. So that is actually fine. This might just work. I'm trying to rule out just for visual sake. Why can't we see this? Might be because I think that is because seriously, this should be under normal setter getter logic. These are kind of done that. There you go. When I change this, it's 2, 1. Beautiful. Unlike what the documentation said, I think maybe they said you don't really have to, but you kind of have to use this. Although when you use this without this, so I'm suspecting what if we don't do this? 2. So maybe this actually works. If this is not a tool, but you have set get, then it actually doesn't keep it. I think I remember a case. But the tool itself is actually forcing the inspector to show it because you're already setting the value like this. So this is no longer needed. So let's give proper names to this. Create positions. In here, we are essentially creating a representation. That is a heavy duty topic for initializing 3D model. Create this, and this is the value, the real text value. That text value, it is essentially the representation. So is this. Don't need this. We are going to print representation, which is basically going to be eggplant. Print representation. Done. This your thing now is eggplant. Pepper. Pepper is not selected. Grr. So what is the difference? This one value. But when you do it this way, you are not keeping. So this is the value you want to assign. This is the text value that we are going to do and do the lookup. But in terms of editor consistency, this is what we need. So pepper, it's going to stay like pepper. It's going to stay 3 or whatever. Mess with it. That's fine. Changing this. And I bet when you keep changing this, the model that is going to be initialized under this will also change. So that's what we're about to write. So when I save this scene, reopen it as eggplant, then this should actually say eggplant, whatever it set. Because I think those are instance or scene. At least that's the idea. This feels like some advanced Godot shit. Nothing to do with the game development itself, but it's more like tool building. Yeah. So in a way, this work here was just so we can test the tool functionality. What we have to keep in mind here interactive scenes will be inside each other. So if we are initializing an interactive object inside the contents node, interactive, this is going to be nested. Now, there seems to be a very little difference between contents and positions right now, because for the confusion, it's because if this interactive object's position, if that position can be set, because it is essentially a spatial object, and if such an interactive object is create, let's say, 3 interactive objects under contents, each one has its own position, and they are just the contents of another interactive object. Practically don't need this. But we are keeping this position information so that we could assign select points where the content can go. So essentially, whatever is going to be inside here will be defined. This object's position will be defining another object under content, like the position of object inside content. This is sort of like a placeholder. Interesting. Say if we were doing this, yeah, I'm just thinking of the next insane level of inception here. The trellis model has three sections, three different varieties, just like tomato has 5 or 6 different growing phases. If all those growing phases are just part of the same model, or not, or whatever, similarly, this is just its own model, has sibling models. I mean, if all we are doing is selecting a bunch of things from a drop-down menu, and we are manually adjusting things, all the Blender scenes can just be in one file. Of course, it would be an organizational nightmare, but I think this new system we devised in Godot will allow us to do that. Because now I'm at that point that whether I am individually exporting this trellis or this, or am I exporting all three so that there's just one trellis model and I just get to pick one? Because the reason why I'm asking this is when I come here, pepper is still one pepper. Mind you, we will have varieties. So it's the same kind of question that I'm asking specifically for trellis. I have 3 different trellis models. How many trellis identifiers am I writing in? And of course, the next question is, do we even divide that list between equipment and plants? In other words, are we creating a tree there? Because when you say trellis, tree variance. But do you really want to see trellis next to pepper? That list will be hundreds of items. So in essence, I'm not quite building the game. I'm building tools that will build the game. Whatever works. There's something nice going on here. It's comforting me. The simplicity and the possibilities. Looks so simple, deceivingly simple. What other things can we export to the inspector? Can we export conditional fields? Could we have equipment and then planting stuff? When we choose planting, do we get to see all the plant types? That sort of thing. Interesting. So under export, we have array. So then you could have array of arrays, which is actually not something we are using because we are using enums. Because arrays were only giving awkward looking inspector elements. This acts like an array, but looks like drop down list. Could you actually have an array of enums? That would be when you have an array of enums. Then you might, but then we have to click the array to choose either the 0th indexed enum, first index. That would not use an integer thing. It flags. Resource stuff. So not fully missed. Load shift. This is where we got. Pretty much it because the bottom is just this. Let's read this part. Not every type of export can be provided at the level of processing data or logic. This is not so important. In script category. Script variables is one example of it. So yeah, I think what they mean, this is an internal thing. This is normally not here. The script variables is not there. By default, the top is a spatial. Here is this. The fact that this appears here is the result of this, which is kicked in internal. Now, we actually extend this. Is this the example? It is always free to try. Func underscore get property list. Just put this stuff here and see how it goes. And of course, if you do it this way, nothing will work. Section. It says if there is going to be properties here, and I'm just appending a new property, the name will be debugged just like representation positions. Type will be nil. In this case, the type is enum or integer, and the usage is there's some special notification. So when I save this, I bet this script variables will be updated just one or not. And the fact that the name says get, I think actually set property list, which is name is the name of the category to be added. Set a property is category. So the type nil can be ignored. With similar names can be grouped. This might be useful for interesting. I think there is also set something. But I was set. Let's first do this. Is this even firing? It does twice. Kind of suspecting a foul business. The fact that I did that. There is some base name. Code not great position. I think this is some kind of race condition, whether it's ready or not. Yeah, because it does edit. Yet in the first iteration, that's why it keeps running it. And then get to see this full times. Clear. Just remove one white space. Save this file. You'll see multiple calls here. So my only question is this. None of this will be important, which is here. If none of this happens, this happens. Bitching about this fact. For now, this, do this, and then of course it's there. Is the undo by put a space. Are we firing this? We are. So what is actually happening right here? Where is this going? Actually, instead of removing all that stuff, this is the part this is the part that is responsible. Everything else will just work as if it's triggered from outside. So when we do come here, do we see this done? Kind of got it. This get property list. I'm going to investigate this a little bit more. So, instant update. Inspect. Yeah, this is sort of like, because it's tool, we are doing it. Such as when you set or override, when you select a node, I am selecting. Yeah, I don't see stuff when it's sort of running. Group list, group subgroup, AB, 2, 3, ABC, list ABC. I don't think this is a control thing. Vector things can be added to any node. To be, that's what I'm claiming, because everything is. So if this is working only because this is control, and right now I can't. Well, I mean, suppose I simple enough that I'm going to change this type to a control, just like that. Changing the nodes happen. That is my claim. Because why should this change and clear this? Change node, come back, come back. Nothing is going to happen. None of this is really firing. Get property list. Everything that is here is var. So this is the most simple thing here. Just sort of ABCs. Just type bool is actually defined here. Yet here nothing. Debug conditions. Usage. I think this is a very fancy way of creating a property list, because I think using there is a way to create hints in script. I think somewhere here we were this one tool mode. Here's the script GD script reference. Okay, in this content here, there was a way to write hints. Look for it. How do you actually say Godot hint? Because this is the same kind of like search problem. Say export. This is thinking that exporting the game, but then I think there was something else. Type this, then you go into the script reference. So it doesn't separate the game engine topics from the language topics. Whether it's C# or GD script, export key. That's kind of the problem with the search. It's not exactly couldn't select the content. This. So essentially, Google it. So open the website. List of export hints. There is a way to hint. I remember. Exports. Wasn't I just there? Yet when I search for it, I swear just a minute ago it could not find anything on this page. String is a path to a file custom filter provided as a hint. So this is the hint. You write some kind of text and comes the short hint. Yeah, you could write string. There's like this is going to show as rotate underscore hint string. Form of an argument to the example. So yeah, these are hints. So when you roll over, this is going to say like the texture. But then I couldn't remember like maybe yeah, where I'm going to write like comma something. That was the hint. Why am I discussing this? Because this actually had a long hint section saying yeah, this is just a fancier version of writing a whole bunch of thing in just one line. Here to read that sort of stuff. Not needed. So let's undo so we can actually some of this stuff here. Need it. Definitely need it. This to be die. Okay. Save. Clear. We broke a bunch. I'm no longer seeing. Should be. Oh. Let's quit to the project. Interactive. There you go. Batcom. However, what I noticed is that this I did not save. always reset. Why should it? As long as there is no change, it will always keep its previous representation, which is fine. So I change 5, that's fine. So if I save this file, close it, open it. Imagine I actually save this file as eggplant. Here's my eggplant representation. And if for some reason I'm resetting things, well, I think that's good enough. You know, like, or okay, what else do you want? I mean, if I'm going to delete one of them and then just keep the position of other ones, I can manually delete it instead of doing this just for me so that I don't end up deleting everything manually, because I'll be positioning them after the fact. This. Okay, this simple model is kind of working now. Onto the representation. Positions will work. Has not been tested, but it's promising. How do I... It's an inherited scene, so I should already be had model export. The model export is essentially a GLB file. Go and look at the because eggplant will have 5 phases, and if each phase is its own GLB file, I could create this. Then, but if I'm doing that, why can't I inject this inside plant scene under represented parent node? Like this way, it's a bit more listed. And the way interactive it is kind of take this, will have its own ref ID, stick it in here, which is going to be ID number 2. And then I'm basically doing this. Say position 3D stuff. Their parent is positions. So under representation here, I will have multiple phases of GLB, or one thing which is parented to this. Something like this, this thing. This is going to be a packed scene according to Godot. Name will be this is where we're going to be called eggplant. And then duplicate this. What are you doing? This, this, and copy this. 2. This is not the way this is name. It's kind of instance. So this is actually missing an instance here. Yes, except the ID here. And I bet if I save this file, if I go back to Godot and reopen that interactive scene, this is going to work, and it's going to inject a pack scene under representation. There's only one way to see this. Yay! So this is a hybrid approach. We have an inspector script that lets us create multiple positions. We could write little application, some kind of script that actually runs in console that maybe asks for the model name, whatever, which actually injects this here. Mind you, that is also maybe possible here. But although it's still easy enough to do it in the inspector, we are still selecting a lot of things here, because that was kind of the worry, like when this will be hundreds of items. Whereas if those item names are in a for loop, I could be writing some kind of code that actually injects lines here. And I'll just save this interactive scene as like, okay, this is the ultimate eggplant interactive object. Then you move on to trellis and you move on to other things. Then go and manually maybe define their position. A lot of exciting things are happening. But see how efficient. I think I'm gonna have to feed the cat. Being patient here, so I'll reward him. So stream break, and I'll be back soon. So we were actually investigating how to divide the representation drop down into more manageable thing, which led to the whole discovery of this get property list and such. We concluded that it was sort of a fancy version of writing this stuff, which then led us to investigating if we can actually do that work manually a bit with the text here in VS Code. It is perfectly possible because it's a text scene. You could see actually the representation, all these nodes, but it's essentially this. What you see here on the left is this. So we did some manipulation here. We injected eggplant model. We created as a pack scene and reference already exists, and we just stuck it under presentation as the parent here, representation parent. But this worked just fine. So we could actually crank this out very quickly. Because even this number of positions, we will know that either ahead of time, well, you kind of need to know it ahead of time if we are going to write something. Well, there's a JSON file, and for a trellis model, you need 5 positions. So someone has to do that work. So 5 for this game object, 3 for another one. That's fine. What we are kind of doing in Godot, exposing things to the interface, is that when I want to create a trellis model and I do 5, this is sort of going to arrange itself. Then I will save it as I'm going to doing this for like maybe hundreds of models. It is still a lot faster than copying this shit, deleting stuff, rearranging stuff, whatever. This is already beneficial, but it might still be unwieldy. We are looking for ways to make this process faster. This also gives us another benefit too, that later when we open an existing model, we could just update things, and then it'll still kind of do basic update being a certain extent. So I looked at array of array as an export option. I think we looked at that. Maybe we could actually look at this, and just to try and see what happened, let's put it up here. So here's an array, size 2, and then each index is an array. Now the question is, could this be an array of enums? Okay. Now here's one enum representation. Okay. This enum is not going to change, therefore there's no need to create. Well, there's maybe need to create a second one so that I could actually try those 2 enums. Let's make this enum. I don't think it actually like that. And I think this might work just like that, but I'm not sure how. Say this by itself is okay. Let's have whatever. Okay, not representation, it's frustration. So if this is going to be a 2-dimensional array of frustration and such, so if anything, this should. Again, this by itself is okay, harmless. This is already being used here, exported. This is what we are trying. Frustration. Presentation. Misplaced enum. This might just work. But then it does not let you do the drop down. And this is something that you kind of use in your game. You have objects which expose them, not expose them if you're debugging and but the not exactly. As corny as it may sound, it's actually a very straightforward question. Bunch of properties and we'll hidden under a group right here. Do I have I seen any case where the visibility of a group is conditional on a check somewhere? I've seen something. And I would like to think that this and group name and the way it was this sorry for the language. Um, I mean, there is nothing here property wise that says group other than the name itself is. It's as if this is kind of like a if this works somehow, is this group the same thing as transform? This is the name of that group. So in other words, is this as translation slash sorry transform slash translation? Looking at this example. And I think when I did this, I did not really. Okay, here's a moment of truth. First, I thought this actually had nothing to do with like node being control or not. The rest is up there. You have to try. Okay, this is that. Fine. I just have to do the proper indentation. But first of all, go. Okay, fine. You are an interactive screen. Okay, you're good. we are going to create another script. Save as nonsense. You being nonsense and sign nonsense. So you are officially. We have not lost interactive script. Still, this now has to be, of course, a GD script in GD script. We don't know whether this should be indented if or not, but I think it is not because it looks like you have to do it regardless. Turns out, according to this, it is actually. I would think this actually should be. Anyway, that's what the person wrote. That's further notice. So when I save this, do this. Here's a group. Interesting. List ABC subgroup. This has nothing to do with this. It just happens to be a Boolean value. If we could hide this bad boy, depending on this, the next step to take will be having a drop down here, enum, equipment or planting, and then this subgroup is only populating planting or equipment model list. But this is an interesting development, which kind of was not possible with only this. Maybe it is actually working with. I mean, this looks so complicated for just two fucking variables. Look at the simplicity of it. Done. And then the rest is what I'm trying to do. This is not even, it's just 3 lines. Versus this sense. How it works. The goal is to make this work like this. But of course, like I said, this subgroup is only visible for the list. Where can I find a decent document? This one. String hint canvas. It's a type string. It's an integer. No, it's actually a string. Okay. Use default. Hint none. Besides show type. But if it did show a hint, it would show this. Assuming hints are always visible unless you say none, so I'll remove it. Node. Tooltip, other tips. Neither one of these is. Do we have documentation for this? Returns the object's property list, an array of dictionary. Each property's dictionary must contain this name. You know, type. That's the type. one of those types might be. That's actually reassuring. Optionally, you can also include hint. See property hint. Hint string and usage. Property usage flags. That is, well, hello. Usage editor. That is the default type. Default is just, it's not mentioned. Do we even have default here? Default usage is either storage editor, kind of fallback. Yeah, storage editor network. 1, 2, 4. Those are the most basic types. In the bitwise, in the bit flags that they are the first. Deprecated usage flag unused. Checkable. This property can be checked in editor inspector. Checkable. Yes. 16. Default. So when you do default, I think it kind of finds that, well, here's a Boolean value, so then it maybe it does implicit assignment later. What is the default usage of the Boolean? Okay, the fact that this is here is maybe in conjunction. So it kind of like, when don't mess with it, just leave it default. Translatable string group. Used to group properties together in the property usage group, which is not here because the property itself is not used for group. So technically you could have a property that acts like a group. You manually write it here. But instead, I think this is all happening internally in the game engine. When the name is this, it's using these names as the group. Maybe it does some kind of decomposition, extracts these parts and creates maybe other objects in the array. Don't know, don't care, guessing it. Used to categorize properties together in the editor. This is interesting. It's kind of direction we're trying to go. Unless this category is specific to whatever category they. Okay, we have two things here that are interesting. These two. This is already covering the first three. Because 1 plus 2 plus 4, it's 7. Which is then like kind of explains 64 plus 7. Default internationalized thing, which is this default and I bet this storage and network 5 will be the editor, network and storage. Not that I need to know but kind of trying to make sense. So the end goal is to write this form as simple as this, but first things first, let's try to make subgroup conditional part of the inspector whether this list ABC on or off. So I see. Here's a generic set method. So which property is set to what value? If this property is mess with, this is updating the inspector. The fact that this call is not made here means that we don't really care about subgroups. That's why I was saying maybe in all cases you sometimes maybe. So when ABC value is true, only then. Okay, see if ABC is true. Okay, so I think this guy was already doing what I'm testing. If this is off, there you go. So okay, let's carry some stuff from here to okay. We are this is already exported. I think this get business. This business is actually a get property list is we are not going to use stuff, and we are already doing this set here that is not needed by to a certain enum model type equipment planting. Okay, so model type should be exposed to the suppose we can property list. Append and name. It's a dictionary. It's name like this. Because everything is sort of listed under group, I will follow that convention. Group list ABC is going to be, this is just a string, this is going to be model type. Okay, it should be just like that. What is the type? Type is type enum. It's a dictionary. Dictionaries are going to be rendered. Question. It is a dictionary. What did the program say? What is necessary? Name type. Where was I reading? Was it? I think I was reading that, but in the previous Good, we'll need this, but there was something get each property's dictionary must contain at least name and type. So we've done that. Name and type. There is the usage, which is sort of default. Okay, whatever. Let's not care about that. Let's save it. Here's a model type, which is null, because whatever value is supposed to be assigned, we do not. How does it know list ABC is this? Because it's because this is the name of the thing that actually matches, and for visibility reasons, I actually model type should be this. Mind you, this is not a variable. Actually, we just label as the need a variable here. That variable is going to be or no. This is how it's explained. Yet this is where we can actually do lowercase. It's just empty. Oh no. If property is group, I think Godot is smart enough to do base there. I remember seeing it. It's still an addition. And what were you expecting? This model type would be of type, would be listing equipment, just like here. And you even do something. Maybe this is it's like that's interesting. This is basically a dictionary. This is where we were trying. Drop that. And if all this is sort of redundant, because all the magic is because this is actually handling the value. Just I see some hope here. If I could pull this off here, simplify, bring that knowledge in. So the only thing that is left now is whether this is just like this. We will track if the value is equipment. First, let's make it a drop down. This is drop down in interactive G situation. And the way it made it drop down is this mechanism. this case it is okay because this is a type dictionary. Case of I think there was something going on here. Let's read. There was something type list. I always get hung up on that. The list, the way I'm reading this list, where was it? Yes, there is actually a type here, enumerations. Here is string. Because I mean, heck, we could even put some more advanced stuff here too in our vector notepad. Object 17 dictionary, the int array. This full byte. Max. So what I'm curious about is that I do not remember, you know, having a specific type. I always thought it was a dictionary, but once it's exported to the inspector with a special notification like this, it is either shown as a dropdown or it is shown as dictionary. Pretty much like array, you expand it and instead of the index. Let's look at the nonsense. Forget about that because we are already hanging. Here's set. If properties group something. So first of all, when I change something, setting something, just give me what property I'm changing. Okay, this is where the magic makes starts. Here's output. Okay, save this file. Here's already what by default it sets. Clear. Here's eggplant, pepper. Set representation. It already knows that I'm trying to set the representation. Now, when I do this, of course, it doesn't tell me. Well, it kind of tells me though. It's representation. So I could technically do if property equals representation, then output something. Could do that. And then I may as well group that under something, which is sort of an extra thing. Maybe I don't need to group. Not too obsessed about it. That's like when I have hundreds of fields, that's fine. If property is representation, okay, then output this. Something like this. What is the value? Okay, this. And of course, all this is going to fire too because screen. This did not result in anything. This is almost an internal call because this is grayed out. When it's like this, always, and this is where this thing might either do this manually under this if, or I just the pepper red onion. Unless I had a typo here. Because this kind of works. Okay, see this property is group. See, all this is firing like white. It's explicit printable. All the grayed out ones are. Sometimes you'll see those output parts if you're interacting with other parts of the game engine. So this is sort of like, yeah, this kind of fired. Not necessarily this is fired. Sad. I want to rule out every single property. Is any this property B? Here's of list A, B, C. It's what if representation is the text, because this is kind of matching, and yet there is no if property is this. What is the gaming engine thinking of this? It is this variable, that string. So then if this exists and it kind of comes here for this string, this might just work because it's kind of coming empty. So there's no typo. And then this is where we are actually assigning stuff to. There is some missing bit here. This name representation doesn't quite exist here because we are trying to do it the monkey way. So now we are doing the simple way of exposing to, as well as doing it this way, which is appending, which because it's an interesting case. So then both lists are this is the main difference. I have to type it dictionary, it's a dictionary, but the same dictionary kind of thing exposed like this, then I have success in tracking this stuff, not this stuff. So I have the win here for visual representation of this. Fortunately, the property name is representation. Usually this is appealing. Functionality wise, it doesn't work. This has the functionality that works, but doesn't look as appealing. For hundreds of items, you don't want to deal with this. What is this again? I think in this whole affair, I also checked this fact. Do this. It's now no longer has any. Because this is no longer. This way. We have to kind of do it this way. And then there's a group here. It's no longer grouped. It's like. So I'm kind of convinced that these two functions work hand in hand. It's edit to ordinary export. Kind of answer that question was by experience, but also call that when I'm only printing the value, or at least I think I'm not printing. But what is representation? It is the value. And if that is not set, then I don't think any of this is also. Uh, and then I also did some stupid basically turn into. I don't think this shorthand method is letting you have export condition. But this is making this on the interface either on or off. That is done. ABC true, then so if I could have this model type look like representation, I could take this part and put it in if state. Then the type will be yeah, I think it makes sense because this is running when something is changed. Okay, it's either appending or not, so it's if When something like this is here, it's always edit. And then after the fact, how are you going to hide it? So you need to have either setters or getters or like something like this, so that you are appending or not appending. Only ugly part is this. I could either append this or not, but then this still looks weird. So then the question is as simple as how can I make this dictionary to look like that enum dropdown usage. I think this is where it might be like don't do the default usage, okay? Because I think this interface knows that this is like a dictionary, and under normal condition it renders it. But the fact that when you do it like this, it knows that this dictionary is going to be exported as an enum, and it does this. So this has to be property usage default. This is one of those things here that I was um this usage. What is the name? What is the name? Property usage. Somewhere here we will have property into usage flags. This one of these, because they have something for checkable or not checkable. Because you don't just type the false or true as a string, it turns it into a checkable checkbox. So I mean that is kind of by default, but the fact that this is already mentioned. So group makes me think that it is that grouping thing. How about category? It's free to try. Usage. This. Oh boy. And we are not going to do anything with the representation. So I'm undo all monkey business here. Our representation model type is important. We are not doing anything when it's set, but because we are not even playing it, doing this first. Presentation, yeah, still in the monkey business. Model type is important. Okay, this is as intended. This is where things sort of, if I don't do this, the goal is still to show this checkable, check default into Twitter help. None of that. Group. Ooh. Hey. It was as simple as that. Network, no editor. I think that was that network 1 plus something. It's not going to be. No instance state. Script variable. That actually sounds like a script variable. There was storage editor. Editor inspect. Would it be? Oh, I tried that. I think I know what it is. It is this hint. Some of these things say the hint. It is going to be hint. Yeah. When you have color, there you go. You know, this is the something. Because sometimes you show color. It's like color picker, but it's basically so why don't we force this editor, but this stays default, and you know what happens? Store that. So we need something else. Because the fact that this is done, yeah, like imagine you create an interval. You don't even define one value, so you have like a range, and you have minimum, maximum value. So when you do the range, it changes the inspector to reflect that it is on a slider. It may work in when you also type hint here. It's also going to work. You know, file is what other thing? That is just it, global length type dictionary. What if this is an array? You even have array type. That I'm fooling myself all this time. It kind of looks like dictionary, but it acts like array. Because when you select stuff, you get the index number. There is never key value. Or the key is 0, the value is the value you see in the. Because I kind of want to try this model type. So screw this, say var color, and say it's actually red. It's this. It is string, but let's add another property. It's a group model type or group color. Okay. You have color, it is this, and then here you do your color null. This is what I mean. It doesn't put the string there. It puts this, so it actually turns. This is still an array, not a drop down, like the way it is normally done. What is specific? It's a group color. Can I? There's no debug like. And I did not have to fuss with any of this. When you get the value or set the value, only to expose it to. Maybe I this drop down. To color. This is actually I think here's the problem. What is this? These three things. Here's a variable, holds some, takes some space in memory, and here's its value. What is actually model type? It's just a reference. There's no such thing as anything like that. Try to do this, but then this is not assigned to anything. So when you come here, it's sort of okay. But then it's just a reference. Just look at the reference. There is no assignment. So if there has to be some kind of this has to be assigned. I don't think this exists, does it? And then it is not going to be an array. It's going to be a dictionary. Now you could kind of assign it to dictionary. Fine. This usage default where I was. I think that is more aligned with group. This default. Guys, no instance state. What is this? Property doesn't save its state in paxi. Script variable. This property is a script variable which should be serialized and saved. Actually, it's kind of is that because that's what we are trying to do. Save. it has no, and then this hint here is what's making it this, whereas we know is a hint. Now, what if you just do this? Source type. There is directory, so you could like sometimes. Default. If anything, it should. Instr. Oh, no. I think this is the wrong part. The wrong part. Because when a value is selected, I am essentially selecting an integer or a string from an enum or dictionary or an array. But the hint itself is an enum. Kind of looks wrong, but what if everything working together and everything is wrong? It's kind of defaulting. I have another explanation. Look at the type color. This is just for vector representation. This by itself doesn't looks like a colored square, but what is actually the value when it's like hexadecimal? When something looks like an enum drop down list, essentially the type is maybe an integer. There you go. That's it. Now we kind of have to populate the values. And I don't think this was interesting. Now, whether this is int or string is topic, but I think this is the right step. This type business here is what's let me also do this. This is kind of promising. Okay, now maybe, just maybe, because This kind of looks hard-coded too, but again, I'm suspecting reference, like a pointer thing, like in um, that somehow has to be exposed through get. So and because the way it's exposed is not through its value, real value, but it's from its reference. Because look at all this. Group subgroup ABC, you are returning the value of ABC, which is 1, 2, 3. But what is the value of this? It's actually kind of whatever is assigned, it's kind of a reference. So maybe there is some point in, but maybe not, because again, like we actually have that function. There is maybe something. Getting closer by the minute. I think I'm going to cut off the streaming feed stuff. This is very promising for future work. Because not the first game I'm going to do. This is certainly not the first and the last set of objects I'll be creating on a regular basis. Figuring something like this out represent a future opportunity where we have data files and we just expose them to the interface and just keep creating them. So close and yet color mode. Dumb as it's how will this work? And then this was sort of my first thing, right? It was not exposed. I tried, but then thing going on. That is even working. Blah blah blah. This. Type integer. There is no such thing as default type. I think dictionary. Right. By itself, it's not a dictionary. I bet if I had a dictionary of dictionary, it has to be a simple type because enum is whole. It could either be string or integer, but I think it's in when we get the value when it's changed, it was integer. We piece dot this. I think here the main problem is whatever value is going to be here, it is no longer, it is never set. Okay, so take this. Oh, turn in. That's how we error parsing expression. That's just not labeled. What if you cannot do that? Displaced enum. You cannot create enums in Slack. But then again, we are not exactly creating a... Okay, so here's an idea. Though the representation is going to be like enum. The value will be string. I'm just passing an array of string here. And why am I even holding this? What if we did something like this? These sort of 0 and 1. And instead of keys, we values. Type, type. So do we even know if this is working? We don't know because it's like this. And then here's values. So you just do model type, lowercase, because we are thinking that these always have values assigned. So the value is assigned through that. Darn. Because before I mean, I'm thinking blah, but let's do some check here. It's 0 and 1. That is actually interesting because that should not be 0 and 1. It should be the real values. What are you talking about? Okay. Oh, okay. The keys become, yeah, unlike the dictionaries where what you type is the key, where you get it as keys. Here, the keys are actually giving you the values that you see represented in the your keys. It's actually this. So when we output it, that's good. So these values should be actually fed into here. The fact that they are not is the fact that something is kind of changing, but it is maybe never registered. So that's the problem here. If it is this, kind of lives in that universe now. You turn yourself, and the representation, and here is because I also have to keep the right. What is the value? Model type. And here is kind of a typical problem though. Because if model type is only going to be either one of these, why am I assigning the whole thing? I need to do this. Get group model. So far, okay. Delete this. I want to believe that this is typo. String is now wrong. This should be. And I bet if this worked, it would actually automatically select it. Magically, this turned into a drop down. That was actually very exciting moment. The fact that this works, whatever I selection make here, may enable another drop down. So that's that. Let's populate this. Um, why can't we just return a normal array here? Can't we do something like here's an enum. I know I'm abusing it. It's an array. And I know you can't really create an enum here. I think I should be saying my last word. Unlikely I may actually keep doing the work after the stream. But tomorrow morning, uh, either I push this forward and get it done because it's looking promising, or I actually go with manual method as I was suggesting because it's for vertical slice. So yes, it sounds a bit counterproductive, but keep creating model references manually. Maybe I'll just do basic import and then save and then duplicate, that kind of thing. At least we'll be able to use UI elements and hit the find an item, hit the buy button, so it actually initialize the correct scene. Because we have other worries such as position data and all that stuff. The game may be progressing because this work, although it's exciting, it is not adding any value to the vertical slice. It is adding a great deal of value to the game and to the project management, but it is also creating a bottleneck. Right? I just allowed myself to do this work day before today, but enough may be enough. Tonight, that might be. So then we'll go back to this sort of simple code. It's kind of down to a certain extent, like it's working more or less manually, more or less automatically. This is kind of like the full automatic system. So I'll just give it a few more minutes and then maybe close the stream and then rest a bit. And this is definitely not. I do not think it is possible to create a dictionary. Is it? Is it possible to create a dictionary? It is going to say it's expected. Something like this. That is possible. No matter how you do it. When you do that, or here, you just return the model type. Just the dictionary. With just one item here. It's as if this is completely irrelevant. Yet when it's just a thing. This is just for could it be this? Because I think I kept asking this question before. Well, if I'm just defining stuff here, how does it know how to assign variables to these names? Because they have some kind of relevance here. And the fact that this is like this, color is here. But no, I figured that was because it, yeah, because when I request group model type with the uppercase M, this is essentially like I made a call here, and this will, so what to assign it. Doing this dictionary and string, please. String set. Okay, so that's it. I'm just gonna be clicking things here. It's no fun, and break is needed. Maybe my subconscious will show me an obvious way that I have missed so far. So I'll see you tomorrow. We'll actually continue the game development work instead of a tool development. But we'll see. So have a good night.